very much. I appreciate you taking your time to be with us. It's gonna be okay for the whole thing to be videoed up there as well? Because I'm just self-centered enough to stare at myself. But that's okay. You can do that. I just want to make sure it was doing what it's supposed to do.
Can you zoom in a little bit?
Can you make me tall?
Oh, what do you? Well, let me zoom in and then I'll turn off the projector. Hold on. This is the first time we used this part of it, so I don't know. Hold on. Well, I gotta have this part up, but I can turn. There we go. How's that?
Now I've got it. Everyone's undivided attention.
It was just your attention.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I'm used to thinking about. Just blank screens. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. Isn't this a beautiful location? It makes me feel fancy. I wasn't going to wear my jacket because I'm afraid that it clashes. But whenever I got in here and saw how fancy it was, I felt like you deserved for your speaker to have on a jacket. So here I am, clashing and all. How many of you are already aware of my story? Just about everybody. So that's good. So we can talk about other things. I'm only going to make a couple of quick points, and I'm going to watch my watch in doing so. And then I want to take plenty of your questions. That's my favorite part. It's not a part that I'm accustomed to through the ministry. I don't know when the last time you went to church, but there's not usually a question and answer session after the preaching. So I enjoy it, and I enjoy being able to understand and learn what it is that's important to you. Why in the world would I be here tonight? Maybe it's the money. Maybe y'all all chipped in a good bit, and maybe I'm going to make a fortune in this one event. This may be my last event. I may retire from this event. This may be maybe it's because of all the fame and notoriety and how good looking I am up on the screen. There's a lot of different reasons that Christians accuse me of doing what I'm doing. But if you follow my story at all, you're going to realize, like all of my friends and family realize, that this has been an extremely high price to pay for this level of notoriety. This has been an extremely high price to pay to get to meet beautiful people like yourselves. So why would a person do this? Why would a person lose family, lose friends, lose their finances? As a matter of fact, just last week, after 7 months of wrestling with attorneys and my mortgage company, we finally settled our bankruptcy. It is official. I'm finally bankrupt this time. 7 months. 7 months it took us to do that. Everybody gets paid back, and the most important thing is that it stopped the foreclosure, and we saved my home, where my son still lives with me. Why would you do that? Why would you bother? Why wouldn't you just go to work at Walmart if you can? Once you get in the New York Times, it's a little difficult to go to work anywhere. So thank you, New York Times. But why would a person, I actually have friends that own atheists that own companies, that they'll call me up, they'll be very sympathetic, and we're having a great time on the phone, and they'll ask, how's your finances? Are things starting to work out? And so I'll tell them the things that I just told you. And they'll be like, I would love to have you on board. I think we've got this great position for you, and I'm with you. I stand with you 100%. I don't believe everything you don't believe, but I don't know. I don't know if we can get away with it because you've got too much press. Why would a person go through these things? And the reason is very simple. The reason is extremely simple. And it's because now we know there's only one life. There's only one life. And I'm going to be careful. I want to preach at the very end for those of you who can stomach it. So I'm going to try to stay a little mellow at the moment. But what we're understanding is that in the greatest country, supposedly, that the human race has ever experienced, we're living in a time where someone who started off in the ministry at 17 years of age is not allowed to grow. is not allowed to learn new things. That's really what this story is about. This isn't about someone who suddenly decided I was going to put up an American Atheist billboard in my front yard and offend all of my Catholic neighbors. I didn't do anything like that. I didn't go to Walmart naked and cause a stink, because I was suddenly liberated from all moral constraints. I didn't protest anything. I didn't do anything but continue to learn. And as I was learning, I began to change my self-expression. And so as hard as it is for me to believe, it is true that in the 21st century, in the United States of America, people are still not free to express themselves completely and freely. That's what this is about. This is, to me, creating a future for the next generation is free to express themselves, is worth bankruptcy. It's worth separation. It's worth being disenfranchised from community. It's worth being disowned from relatives. Because if we don't do this, and if we don't do it now, then somebody else is going to have to do it later. And I refuse to accept the idea that this buck just needs to be passed on to the next generation or to the next person who realizes that they don't believe what they believed when they were 17. If you don't already know the story, I got saved at Jimmy Swaggart's church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, as I said, at 17 years of age. How many of you know Jimmy Swaggart? Oh, cool. Awesome. That's great. And I'm sure it's just because of the music. It's not because of any scandals or anything. Yeah. You'd be surprised the different places I go in the country that they've never even heard of Jimmy Swaggart. And I'm like, well, that's pretty awesome. Have you ever heard of Google? And so I got saved at 17. And my contention is that I was hijacked by religion. That at age 17, I had a natural course that my life should have been allowed to travel. That my wife had a natural course that she was on, that she should have been allowed to travel. There should have been room and acceptance for growth and for movement within our lives. But instead, religion stepped in and hijacked our lives and took us off course and on to a completely different path. I think it's worth spending my life telling people this story so that maybe we can do something about that. I don't have an axe to grind. Whenever you read the book, you'll see that I do tell a few stories and I do tell off on a few people, and the attorneys have assured me that there's no liability cases waiting on me in the future. But I don't have an axe to grind against anyone in particular. But what I do have some bitterness about is about living in the 21st century and for religion to still have such a hold upon our culture that this hijacking is not only allowed to take place, it's encouraged to take place. And that people who know better, older men and women in the ministry that know that the promises that they're making to 17-year-old preachers cannot possibly be fulfilled. That the satisfaction that they're promising through this course of ministry cannot possibly occur in the lives of these 17-year-olds because they're in their 50s and 60s and 70s and they've yet to experience it themselves. Religion hijacks lives. And it takes people away from natural courses. I still contend that I am the exact same person, the exact same lover of truth and lover of humanity that I was when I was 17. I still have the same desire to save the world. I still have the same desire to make America and the world better. I still have the same desire to end as much human suffering as I possibly can help end within my short lifetime. I'm still that same person. But the direction that I could have taken from there to here could have been much different. So why would I bore you with all of these things? Because you're the difference. Because you're the fellow passengers on life's plane that's able to stop the hijacking that's in place. I'm just one person. But this is a room full of people that have connections and have, for lack of better words, oversight over a particular part of our country and thus a particular part of our culture. And when you come to meetings like this, it's much more than entertaining just another lecture series. It's much more than just hearing another poor sap's story of how he got screwed over, by the preacher. But what it really is, it's really an opportunity for you to come together, to regroup, to remember, and to reorganize your thoughts and your activities so you can stop this hijacking of America's future. That's what you're doing. That's what you're doing when you contribute. Not just financially, but when you contribute of your time and your energy. Because by now, the United States of America should be an airport full of opportunities. It should be an airport from which every single citizen has the opportunity to lift off of the ground and reach towards expectations and to be able to fly a natural and steady progression towards improvement for themselves, for their families, and for all of our futures. But if that's what America was today, we wouldn't be here. The goal of these meetings and the goals of these types of groups is to get to the place where there's no more need for these meetings or these types of groups. Can I get a Darwin? I can't help it. I'm going to preach. Even if it's in my sleep, I'm going to preach. That's not the culture that exists today. I was intimidated every step along the way by family and by friends. I was intimidated as I would learn something new. At 17 years of age, the first struggle that I faced theologically was this idea of eternal punishment, of a hell that lasted forever. I had heard those stories, listened to those doctrines for 17 years, but I never took them seriously because Mama loved me so much, and as far as I was concerned, God was even better than Mama, so surely He loved me, so hell wasn't an issue for me. But all of a sudden at 17, when it became my responsibility to tell those stories and to teach that doctrine to the people sitting out in the congregation, I loved them too much to hijack their minds if I wasn't 100% sure that that was the direction we needed to fly. And so I began to study on eternal punishment. I began to study on the doctrine of hell, and that took me to studying the King James Version of the Bible, or at least the version that we now reference. Not the 1611, of course, because that would be a little too difficult. And that began to cause me to think things, and it caused me to go into the cockpit of my own life and to investigate where these memes, where these captains of thoughts were taking me and taking everyone that I was associated with. And I became instantly intimidated when I began to realize that the thoughts that I was contemplating, the ideas that I was entertaining, the direction that I thought might be better to go than the one that we were flying in Pentecostalism, once I began to entertain those ideas, I immediately began to sense the rejection, the disappointment, and even the destruction that would come into our lives by simply believing something differently. Now, when you're 5'5", you take all the ego stroking you can get. And I enjoy people, they'll say, "Oh, you're my hero." They'll say, "Oh, you're so brave, so much courage." I enjoy that. I eat it up. Please, every one of you, connect with me on Facebook and say something like that. I'll respond to every single post. I love it. I feed off of it. But the reality of it is, I'm practiced at this. I am very practiced at receiving religious rejection. Because I started off very fundamentalistic in this clothesline version of Pentecostalism that I had inherited from my grandparents. But over time, I changed the flight pattern of my theology, and I became a little more liberal, not anything that you would consider liberal, but it's liberal for us. You could actually have a television. That was liberal. The women could actually put on a little blush. That was liberal, right? I mean, now you're moving into true satanic territory, right? I mean, you know, people are going to die over these things. This is serious. And so we became a little more liberal, and in so doing, portions of my family and portions of my world begin to fall away and begin to be dissatisfied with me and the direction that I was going. I'll never forget, I went into the local barber shop. My barber, his name is George, or was way back then. I haven't seen one in some time. And I sat down in the barber chair with George, so proud that he didn't have to put that little bar for me to sit on anymore. And you'd have to imagine. You know, you don't want to be 20 years old sitting on that little bar, you know, to be tolerant. So I'm sitting there, and he says, boy, I put my foot in it today. I said, really, George, what happened? And he said, well, you know, your Uncle Paul, he came in today, this morning, to get his hair cut. He said, I was trying to just make conversation with him and had no idea that I was going to create a controversy. He said, you remember the last time, George says, remember the last time that you came over and got your hair cut, you and I started talking about such and such scripture. Of course, I was very much a believer at that time. I said, yeah, I remember. He said, you know, you really helped me with your interpretation of that scripture. I said, that's good. He said, so I was going to brag on you to your Uncle Paul. I said, man, I had no idea that he felt about you the way he feels, because I was no longer hardcore Pentecostal. Now I was more charismatic. And Uncle Paul was still hardcore Pentecostal. And George, quoting Uncle Paul, he said, yeah. Uncle Paul says, yeah, Jerry used to be way up here, but now he's way down here. I changed my flight path. In his mind, I had descended. And it crushed me. I was still very much a believer. I was still very much in love with the Lord and in love with the Bible and in love with all these things. But I changed what I was believing. That was almost 2 decades ago. Those changes had taken place. So I am experienced with facing religious rejection. I don't consider myself to be a hero. I don't consider myself to be an extraordinarily brave person. I consider myself to be experienced with facing religious rejection, with changing the flight path. With that being said, I'm now going to step a little further out and say, not to you here collectively, because you're all beautiful and you've all participated, you're all doing good, but it's being videoed. I will say to the atheist movement, you must get off of your ass, get out of the seat, go into the cockpit of the plane of your life, and make some changes. Take control of this culture. Begin to exert an influence on the direction that our country is going. If you're not, then I beg you, for people like me, do so. Please do so. Please consider how you can support something financially, how you can support something physically, how you can share and give of your time. Because this is no longer simply an intellectual endeavor. The time has passed that we can depend on lecture series creating the growth that we know that we need to have in order to change our culture. Because the next crop of nuns, right, N-O-N-E-S, nuns that are going to come out, they are extremely in love with the idea of community. You've got all the intellectuals, right? You've already got all the people who get turned on to the idea that the math doesn't work and all those damn animals won't fit in the ark. Right? You've got them. I'm not saying there's not one or two out there that, have been so busy digging for, I don't know, Jesus' fossil that they haven't seen the YouTube video yet. It's still possible that there's more that you can win, surely just completely by intellectualism. But I'm telling you, the next wave, they're people like me. They're people like me. They're my old brothers and sisters. They're people that are far more concerned about the difference that you're making in the world than the fact that you know how much the planet weighs. Right? They're far more concerned about the contribution that you're making towards the future than the fact that you know exactly when the sun is going to consume the earth and we'll have no more future. They're concerned about this journey that we're all on. And so here's what I prophesy will begin to take place. As people like yourselves, people like me, as we make the necessary sacrifices to build these communities and to do these good deeds, we're going to create a flight path that is so wide that people can't help but individually pass through us. We're going to create an airspace, if you will, that is so wide, and there's so much knowledge of what we're doing and the good that we're doing and the community that we're encompassing, that it will create an airspace that people are going to stumble into. And as they pass through us, they'll realize they are us. Literally hundreds of poor, and I know there's no such thing as soul, but I'm Southern, so get over it. Right? Poor souls that I've encountered, countless individuals that are sincere, that were not able to fit into their local church, fit into the local religious traditions in their communities. They are atheists. They are agnostics, but they don't know it. And the authorities in their communities have told them that they're just backsliders. That they're just missing something some way. That they're in love with a sin that they can't seem to break free of. There's some form of addiction. There's some form of pride. There's some ego that's keeping them from believing and receiving everything that all these other people are believing and pretending to receive. But that's not who they are. They're not backsliders. They're us. But as we grow, as we work, as we contribute, our influence will become so bright and so large that they can't help but pass by us. And then they'll realize that they've got the right to go get in the cockpit of their own lives and to fly their own planes. I will admit to you, and I'm closing with this thought. That's a preacher thing to say, right? You'll know that you're not getting preached to yet because there's no offering plate as passed. That's later. Exactly. I will admit to you that, and you'll see it in the book much more clearly than what I could say it verbally. Giving up heaven, giving up the afterlife, not giving it up, but realizing that you don't believe in it. It's a dark experience. It's a dark experience for some, especially in the beginning. But I've passed through that darkness. And it's not dark for me anymore. Oh, sure, if all of a sudden, as Bill Maher says, if Jesus showed up at the Super Bowl, I'd probably be pretty excited about that. Once we proved it was him, we'd have to do the DNA. And we find out that there really is an afterlife, I'm cool with that. As my wife, she said just the other day, she said, I'm not a believer, I'm a wisher. She says, I don't believe that there's an afterlife, but I wish there would be one. And I'm still that way myself. It was dark, letting go of the afterlife, letting go of all those relatives that's passed. But I've already passed through that. I've worked my way through that both intellectually and emotionally. And now I'm on the other side. And now on the other side, I'm extremely excited and motivated by the knowledge that this is our one life. And that we have the opportunity to express our uniqueness in a wonderful way. And if you're satisfied with expressing your uniqueness by going and tanning your uniqueness on the beach every weekend, and that's all you do, that's fine. That's your uniqueness. You have that right. Fly your plane in that direction. But for me, that's not enough. For me, I desire to express my uniqueness by changing the future and making it easier for the next generation to express their uniqueness. So that one day every child that's born lifts up off the ground and they begin to fly in clear skies with absolutely no fear of being hijacked. Can I get a Darwin?
Darwin.
That's all I got.
If we have Q&A, you just want to come up behind the table. You don't have to get in front of it, but you just want to come behind the table so we can hear you. And if you have any questions for Jerry, he'd love to field questions.
Please, I want all your questions. Everybody
we
has 10 questions.
We have plenty of time. So we have a lot of time for questions. Anybody have any questions for Jerry?
Come on now, don't be shy.
Okay, first I want to say that's one of the best goddamn talks I've ever
Thank you.
Can you tell folks something about the Recovering from Religion program, how that works?
Yes, sir. Thank you. The question is, what about Recovering from Religion? I was the director of Recovering from Religion for a year, and now Sarah Moorhead is the director. It was founded by Dr. Del Ray. Everybody knows Dr. Del Ray. I love saying both names, Del Ray. That just tastes like fried chicken whenever you say it. Dr. Del Ray founded it, and the great thing about Recovering from Religion is not every group. Now, I've got a very good sense of your group and, of course, of your leaders, and so I know that you would have this problem, but some groups have a problem with brand new nods, right? People who are just now beginning to get their feet wet about their unbelief. Because some groups, it's therapeutic for them to come and tell the dirtiest religious joke they can find. Some groups, that's what they're, that's the fun thing they do. Well, if you've got a brand new person, they may not be there yet. They may not be able to handle those kind of things. Or if they have a question that everybody else in the room and everyone else in the group thinks is ridiculous, you'd be surprised how many Recovering from Religion individuals I've dealt with that they absolutely no longer believe in God, but they are still terrified about going to hell. That's a complicated problem, and there's neurological answers to why that problem exists. It's very, very real. Well, you can go to some groups and you can express that problem and get support. You can go to other groups and they say, we're way past that, you need to buck up. So Recovering from Religion fills in the gap. Recovering from Religion is generally a subgroup, part of a larger group that strictly deals with people who are in transition. It really tries to give them a very, very soft place to go and to grow. So it's fabulous, absolutely fabulous and neat. And you've got.
And I'll add one thing to that. And we welcome all people, whether you've known it for years or new. But Dirk, if you two could stand up, these are the Recovering from Religion Foundation locally in Cincinnati. So if you have those questions, we will never make fun of you here. But those are two individuals there that run something, that get on their webpage through Meetup. They'd be more than happy to help you through that as well. So.
Yeah. And it's obvious that you would be very, very welcome in the larger group. The Recovering from Religion groups are able to specialize and take time about particular issues that the larger group may be moving forward trying to change community, and the Recovering from Religion group can be a little segment of community to help with particular needs. So we need a long line of questions. I love questions.
Matt, you had a question?
Yeah, when you were first dealing with your atheism as a minister, or realizing it, how did you deal with the guilt?
I didn't very well. It was.
I mean, did you feel like you were lying to people? Or?
Yes. I felt like I was lying by my presence alone. My presence in the ministry felt like a lie. As I had the luxury of, of having a used car salesman's gift, of twisting speech. And so as my beliefs were maturing, I was able to craft my messages accordingly. So when I stopped believing in hell, I no longer preached on hell. Not even once that I can remember. All the way to the point that I became a deist at one point. I saw myself as a deist. Everybody knows deist, right? Versus theist. And so my messages were deistic messages. I didn't know enough about the sciences. And so to me, it seemed like there still had to be a first cause. And I preached and crafted messages that were deistic. And after I moved away from that, there wasn't a whole lot left but love your neighbor as yourself, right? And so I got up and I crafted a lot of messages that way. But what I knew was that being the pastor, and even after I stopped pastoring and was being called to preach in other places, I knew that getting behind what we refer to as that sacred desk, okay? This is a nice one. Makes me feel at home, right? Yeah. Reminds me very quickly of an incident I saw with one of our old pastors. He would get out from the pulpit and get out in the congregation and preach, which I tend to do myself from time to time. And his wife kept touching him every time he would walk by her. She was sitting in the congregation. He's just preaching up a storm. You know, she'd touch him. And he'd look down frustrated, you know, and he'd keep on preaching. And she just kept trying to get his attention over and over and over again. And finally, he found it so disruptive that he got angry. I witnessed this. And he looked at her and he said, "What is it?" He really embarrassed her in front of her. She said, "Your fly's open." He more than deserved that. You know. So getting behind the sacred desk carries with it a certain identity. And that's the part that would kill me, was that I knew no matter what I got up and said, or no matter what I got up and did not say, that the people sitting out in the sanctuary assumed, and rightfully assumed, that I still believed all of the rest of it because I was here, and I had not publicly said I don't believe those things. And that was the conflict that it literally can drive a person insane. It truly can. In the Clergy Project, on the forums, the communication between the ministers spikes on Wednesdays and Sundays, or at least it did the last time I was involved in there, because they just need to reach out to somebody who understands, because I don't think any of them are intentionally lying, but they're in the same situation that I was in, and after service, they just flood to the forums, and they're like, "We just can't believe how," you know, and these people, they truly want to take their lives. They want to kill themselves, or they want to out themselves in some way that will end this dilemma instantly. And literally, I know this is going to sound like, we're fighting for the other side for a moment, but myself and others, we constantly have to beg these people out of outing themselves in a way that will destroy their lives. And we beg them to give us a little more time, help us figure out a few more programs, help us help them so that they don't suffer the kind of things that I've suffered. So you don't deal with it. You suffer from it horribly. You suffer from it horribly. I think back
I have people come up to me and I tell them I'm an atheist, and I say, "Well, you're going to burn it out?"
Right.
What's your answer to that?
If somebody would come to me and say that, I would probably hug and kiss them.
They will.
They will. And here's the reason why. I do get a little bit of that on Facebook. I've made this joke before, and I still think it's funny. Of course, I think everything I say is funny. So that's if I didn't think it's funny, I wouldn't say it. I was not disappointed by all of the people who once believed I was the man of God that suddenly believed that I was going to hell. But I was devastated by how well they were taking it. That's the part that killed me, was that they were not beating down my door. They were not trying, I've had no one come to my door. I've had a few people call. I've had tons of people, most of who do not know me, judge me and criticize me on Facebook and social media. But I've literally had no one come and knock on my door. And I'm not kidding you. I've pastored hundreds and hundreds of people. I've preached to thousands of people. I've preached to 2,000 and 3,000 people in one setting. And not a single person has come and beat on my door and in tears saying, "Jerry, we got to talk about this. Let's work our way through this." Not a single one. So, honestly, if somebody goes out of their way, as long as they don't appear to be dangerous, if they appear to be dangerous, cut and run or punch them in the throat, whatever you got to do. But if they don't appear to be dangerous, I would say thank you for your concern. I appreciate you bringing that to my attention, because let me tell you, the enemy is not the Jehovah's Witnesses that waste their Saturdays to come knock on your door. All right, because they actually believe. They care about you, or they wouldn't be spending their time to care about something. The ones to resent are all the people who think you're going to hell and don't bother you about it. That's the ones who are disgusting to me. You know, if they truly believe that people are going to hell, here's my question, all right? If somebody tells you that they love you and they believe that you're going to hell, then apologize to them that they're never going to be able to eat again. Because how could a person ever stomach another mouthful of food and believe that somebody that they love is going to be trapped in a house fire for 1 billion years? I mean, you know, and longer, yeah, longer than that. 1 billion would just be the beginning. And what it says to me is they don't believe it. They don't believe it, or they don't love you, one or the other. There was somebody over here, and then over.
The question I had, and you even mentioned the word, but like in the church that I went to, and apparently the church you went to, backsliding was a huge thing.
Yes.
Where when people would leave the church, we just assumed it was a matter of time until they came back.
Yes.
Did you run into that a lot with your family and things
Oh,
like
yeah.
that?
I did. I did. I've gone too far now. Yeah, I don't think anybody's expecting me to suddenly run back down to the altar. But in the beginning, for sure, people considered me just to be backslid or to be, you know, some of them are the film director of Bread and Butter Films, who's doing the documentary, the feature film on us. He ended up with some severe ear trouble while he was down filming this. And so he goes to a local doctor. We get him in, you know, at a local doctor. And so he's sitting there, and the local doctor is asking questions. You know, says, you know, why are you? You know, he sees on the file, you know, well, from California, what are you doing in Ritter? Oh, I'm making a movie. Oh, really? Well, what are you making a movie about? You know? And he says, well, have you ever heard of Jerry Dewitt? Yes. Why would you make a movie about Jerry Dewitt? Well, you know, it's kind of a controversial thing, this, that, and that. He says, let me tell you, Jerry Dewitt is deceived. Right? Jerry Dewitt is delusional. I mean, this is a doctor telling this to a patient, okay, in my little community. I mean, literally just about 6 blocks from my house. Jerry Dewitt is delusional. And so the doctor frees this man to fly back to California with his ear trouble, that there'd be no problem with flying, and it just about did permanent damage to his ears flying back. So apparently the doctor was wrong about 2 things. You know, wasn't very good at diagnosing anything, I would take it. But now most people are like that. But for quite a while, I think people were holding out hope that I was just going through some kind of phase. You know, they're very quick to tell me that I think too much. I said talk too much maybe, but think too much no. Yeah. And sorry, I got you.
Did that
Not on purpose, but it was funny.
I think you kind of answered the question 2 questions ago, but you stuck to the not bearing false witness against your neighbor. Did anybody notice that and at least give you credit for that? Were you supposed to just continue to bear false witness against your neighbor?
Yeah, that's a great point. I was a little surprised that not one time that I know of have I gotten any credit for not lying and staying in the ministry. Not one time do I know of. Did anybody go, well, you know, I mean, yeah, it's pretty brave of him, pretty noble to go ahead and, you know, be true about what he's thinking. I don't know of a single case where I got that type of credit. And there's a reason. There's many reasons, but one reason that's important to me of why that happens or why that's even able to happen is because my contention is that modern day Christianity does not actually require you to believe. Now it says it does, but if you get down into the fine print, what it really requires you to do is to say that you believe. It requires you to make a positive confession, okay? And that's what faith is all about. Faith is really about not knowing. And if you don't know, then you really don't believe, because you can only truly believe things that you know. So it's not really about believing. And this is one of the weak spots in between religion and the English language, is that we misuse a lot of words and we have a lot of cultural meanings attached to words, to where if you're in the clique, you really know what it means, but if you're outside the clique, then you're going to apply Webster's, definition to it. It's going to mean something totally different. I really don't think you have to believe to be a Christian. And so, you can get credit inside Christianity for not believing and still acting and saying that you do. That's actually the test. You know, you're instructed from the very beginning that there's going to be a test. And the test is you're going to encounter things that's going to lead you to believe that what you believe isn't true. And that this is the big test of your spiritual journey. And that's what you have to get over. So, you know, the deck is already stacked against doubting from the very beginning. And in Pentecostalism in particular, we were taught that to even entertain these types of thoughts would open you up for demonic possession. Now that's a thought, okay? I mean, add that to going bankrupt. You know, that you're going to be Exorcist Part 4, you know. I mean, not a pleasant thought. There was somebody over here, and then we'll come back this way. Yes. Sorry. Right behind you, sir. Yes.
Are you a Christian atheist or all religion atheist?
A Christian atheist or what kind of atheist?
I mean, are you a Christian atheist? Means you just believe the Christian God, and when you are in the process of reaching that conclusion, did you give an opportunity to look at or consider other religions?
Oh, that's a great question.
Which are like
yeah.
wisdom-based religions like
Yeah.
Hinduism or Jainism or Buddhism.
Yes.
They don't want you to believe in anything. They want you to just do meditation and experiment with your consciousness.
Yeah. Well, you probably have much more experience in this since you're asking the question than I have. My appreciation of many of the Eastern religions is that they do ask you to believe things unless you're looking at a westernized version. It's the westernized version of the Eastern religions that doesn't ask you to believe anything. And I'm sure there's all kind of variances on that. Here's what I am, you know, and I ran into this not because of that question. That's only the second time in a year and a half that I've had that question, so thank you. I developed a little creed, not because of that question, but it answers it. I developed it because in the beginning I was going from group to group. Some groups called themselves Freethinkers, and some called themselves skeptics, some called themselves agnostics, some called themselves atheists. And most groups were cool with whatever terminology, but a couple of times I bumped into like some agnostics that said, don't you call us atheists because you can't know, you know, don't say that, you know, that's stupid to say that. And then, you know, I'd go to some atheist groups and they'd say, don't, you know, if you call yourself an agnostic, you're just a wimp, you know. And, you know, and I mean, yeah, so all of these different things were going on, and I was like, you know, I done been down that road. Baptist, you know, anti-Baptist, Pentecostal, holiness, you know, I already know about titles, right? I've been in titles for 25 years. So I put together this little creed, and it answers your question to a degree. Skepticism is my nature. Free thought is my methodology. Agnosticism is my conclusion. Okay? Atheism is my opinion, but humanism is my motivation. So that's and so I consider myself an atheist. You know, I would give Hare Krishna or Buddha or anyone the same opportunity I would give Christ. Show up, and we'll talk. You know, I mean, but as of yet, I did study Buddhism. I was in the martial arts for several years. Of course, it was Zen Buddhism, so you know, there's all these variances. And I did look into the Jains, and I did look into Zoroaster, and I did study everything from the Axle Age, you know, up. And so I did make myself familiar with the other religions and found them to always come to the same wall of, if you're going to go past this, there's this thing you have to accept. You know, and if you'll accept that, then you can go a step further. Well, that I had already dealt with. So atheism is my opinion for all supernaturalism. That's where I'm at. So thank you. So then the gentleman in front.
Yeah. It would seem to me that in your ministry, one of your key functions was to attract and excite and encourage young children.
Mm.
And I would think that your transition there would be particularly distressing to their parents. What was that all about?
Well, you know, I was fortunate in one way that I had stopped pastoring prior to all of this news breaking. You know, I was I'd been in the ministry for 25 years, so there were a lot of people who would call me to preach regularly. And the conflict was getting so intense that I was literally lying and making up excuses why I couldn't go speak for this person or go speak at that church, because it was just getting more and more difficult to do so. I actually left Christianity before I left the ministry. You know, I knew that I did not believe in Christian doctrine anymore, but I was desperately trying to figure out a way to stay in the ministry anyway, because I couldn't envision a life without it. I couldn't envision a life without all those relationships. And so I didn't, I got far enough away from it, and I'm only talking about a year or so that I was not pastoring before all of this growth. But I've yet to have any parents who have come to me and said, you know, you got my child saved, you know, we didn't want you to, and, you know, you talked them into it during Vacation Bible School, or vice versa, you know, we were depending on you to lead our children in the right direction. Some of those children have grown up, you know, and they've contacted me and said, were you lying? I mean, I've even had people contact me asking me for particular dates. What did I believe at a particular date? Because that was either like the day they got saved, you know, or I baptized them. I've had them, you know, contact me and say, you know, where were you at with the Lord on the day you baptized them?
Does it count?
Yeah, does it count? Exactly. And I'm like, are you that damn lazy? Just go get rebaptized. You know, I mean, why bother me? If you got any doubt, go get baptized. It's not hard, you know. Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked by, you know, take control of your own plane. You know, that's what I'm thinking. You know, and so anyway, I haven't experienced that on the negative side. Now, what I've experienced on the positive side of that is some very precious young people who were in our youth group are now themselves atheists. And they went that way of their own accord after I'd already stopped pastoring that particular church. They've gone that way of their own accord, but then later on, they, you know, stumble back across me, and it gives a little bit of confirmation to them. You know, it removes some of those last few doubts, and we're very, very close, and you know, and so it's so varied. You know, it's happened in degrees, but not no parent has called me up and said, you know, one way or the other. You know, but most of the people who have contacted me are parents, but they haven't said anything about their children. But to be fair to myself, and I'm always trying to be fair to myself, I was, even by the time I became the senior pastor of the second last church that I was in, I protected the children as much as I could from the things that at that time I was convinced were detrimental. I would not allow anyone in the congregation to create an atmosphere that intimidated or frightened the children. And if the children, say, came up front to pray of their own accord, I would not allow adults to come to them and pray with them in any type of fearful or intimidating or degrading kind of way to, you know, to intensify the naturally built-in guilt cycle that exists within Christianity to start with. I mean, I would literally push them off and tell them, I'll pray, you know, with this person. So the children have always been where my heart was at. So I was trying to protect them to the best of my ability the entire time, which may be why there's not a whole lot of parents out there to be upset. Awesome. If that answers it anyway. Let's see, was there somebody over here before we, let's see, let me get here and then over there again.
We have just come off a pretty recent experience with a pretty awful experience with a Christian church. And I'm very curious to know, after we read a little bit or a lot about your journey, what was the exact moment that night when one of your parishioners was in her brother was in a car accident?
Her brother, yes.
What was the light bulb that went on in your head? What happened?
Well, you know, here's where it's complicated, because as I just stated, I had moved out of Christianity, but was refusing to leave the ministry. Okay? And so that particular moment, that excerpt that's on the website, is really the moment where I realized that there's no hope for me in the ministry, no hope for me in Christian ministry, for sure. And the exact moment is whenever I'm on the phone with this person, there was a young lady, a youth member in our church that She'd helped with the soundboard, and she was like a daughter to us. She calls to get support because her brother had been in a horrible motorcycle accident. I've done this for 25 years. You know, I know this. I know how to pastor. I know what's expected of a pastor. And so when I see her name come up on the phone, I don't instantly know what happened, obviously. But as soon as she begins to give me the details, I know what my role in her life is. I know what role I am to play. And so she's, you know, an hour and a half away, so my role is not to just jump up right then and go over there, though that could have been expected later on. My role is to pray with her on the phone. That's my role. And I cannot explain to you why. Well, actually, I can, but it would be completely reading, you know, word from the book. What I can't explain is why it happened at that particular moment and had not happened previous. But that's kind of the way life is. You know, why didn't you think of that yesterday? You thought of it today. You know, something's growing. Connections are being made. But I knew when she began to tell me the story that what I could not do was pray for her. Could not pray. That's what I knew, was that I couldn't fake a prayer. Okay? And please get the book, because the book tells it much better than I can. And you know, I don't get $1 for each one of you here to say it right now. But the reality of it was that the reason I couldn't pray for her was because I loved her so much. And that might have been what was different that day than the day before, you know. And it could have been totally different had somebody else called with that situation. But I cared about her, and I cared about her future and her thought process so much that I just couldn't harbor that lie. So I just, you know. There was somebody back over this way? Yes, sir.
How is your flight pattern different than your wife's?
Oh, that's a good question. That's an easy question. She don't want nothing to do with the plane. She doesn't want a flight pattern. She wants a normal life, and always did. You know, we discovered very early in our marriage, if we stay married all the way to next April, we will have been married for 23 years. And so from early in our marriage, she realized that she had made a huge mistake by marrying a minister. You know, marrying someone who's so engaged and so responsible to the public. And so she suffered with that, you know, for 2 decades to different degrees. And whenever I came out, it was one thing to hate being married to the person that everyone emulated or, you know, wanted to be. That was bad enough, but to suddenly be married to the person that everyone pitied or didn't like, and she would have to answer for me and for, you know, the steps that I'd made, that was just too much. You know, she felt like that put the entire community in her business. And the breaking point was actually we were so financially destitute by that point that she was throwing together a garage sale. And as she was putting the garage sale together, one of the neighbors walked across the street that she was friends with and said, you know, I'm really sorry that everybody in the street is talking about you, you know, and you know, how horrible it must be for you to be married to an atheist. And that was it. That was done. You know, I mean, it had gone from being something that was on the internet to something that, you know, I got fired from a job that was contracted with our parish. We don't call them counties, we call them parishes. To people in the town making comments to her while she's at work, to all the way down to our very street. And that was it. So she needed to live on a new street. And so that's, you know, we call her an atheist. She's apathetic about it, you know. So was there, oh, yes, sir. I'm sorry.
If a thing that is believed can be proved, what is the need for faith?
There isn't one.
Okay.
Yeah. There isn't. Yeah.
They continually keep messing these things up.
Yeah, they're continuously messing it up. That's exactly right. And even the Bible itself, in certain places in the New Testament, especially the Pauline doctrine, deals with that issue. and deals with the very fact that the Christian faith, see, once again, that's where English fails us, because when we say the Christian faith, we're talking about a philosophy or a theology, right? But that faith within Christianity is acting as if you know something you don't know. I mean, it's very, 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 very clean within Christian doctrine. But yet, that's why towards the end of my ministry, I was telling the congregants, I said, let's not fight over science. Let's not fight over the dinosaurs. Let's not go around trying to tell our kids that the devil planted those bones to, confuse them. Let's let knowledge be knowledge, and let's admit that we don't know these things, and let's call that, faith, and let's just live that way. Let's just admit we don't know it and live that way. Instead, but the problem that Christianity and all supernaturalism has encountered is that they have made their way out of the Bronze Age into the Information Age. And so now they're in the Information Age where the whole point is about what do you know. And so they're being challenged to act as if they know things that they can't know, and that even the Apostle Paul would have not claimed to have known if there was a such person.
Yes, Jerry, I have to just comment. Everything you said was wonderful, agreeable, because I agree with you.
Absolutely, I understand that.
But there was one portion that I have to admit to you, I was having a lot of trouble with as you were telling it. It was the portion at which you decided to dismiss heaven, dismiss anything supernatural.
Sure.
I would rather, to be honest with you, we've been together for 40 years.
Sure.
42.
42.
42 years. We've met on a church of Major Big Iceland. I don't think I've spent more than a week without her. And the few people that I have in this moment that I care about, I like to think of that as more eternal.
Sure.
That's my shit.
Absolutely.
Sure. That way. Now, Mike, if there is a criticism, I'm sorry if it might sound like something you've heard a million times. It sounds almost in that one area that you may be approaching another box. If you're an atheist, you must dismiss all notion. For example, why can't heaven have a natural origin? Why can't the natural life have a natural origin? It doesn't have to be a God. Getting me back with Martha, we might have been joined, I don't know, existentially or something like that, 42 years ago. I can't explain it. But I wonder what kind of machinations you went through to get to that part of the philosophy.
Yeah, and here's where it comes from. And it probably, could y'all hear, could everybody hear the question?
I think you should repeat it.
Yeah, basically the issue, to summarize, is I made statements related to my lack of belief in there being a heaven and afterlife at this point, primarily because of my lack of belief in a God, tying those two subjects together. The proposal is that there may be some form of heaven that is naturally caused, and that by saying atheism deems that there is no heaven, there is no afterlife, that we may be painting ourselves into a box, that there may still be an afterlife or a heaven that is derived some other way than what we've been taught. Is that fair enough to say?
Yes.
Good. And so, yeah, do what? Yeah. And so then the question that's really directed towards me is, what steps did I go through to come to such a conclusion? Does that make sense to everybody? And so here's the thing. A good portion of my journey is propelled by my experience of being a pastor. Because the reason that I relate to religion as a hijacked experience is because I do believe that religious philosophy, a person's religious philosophy, changes motivates or dictates the decisions that they make in their life. They make decisions based on what they believe to be true or not true religiously. And so I watched people within my church, because they did believe in an afterlife, because they did believe in a heaven, and they tied all those pieces together, I watched them make very particular decisions. Sometimes not the best decisions. Because we treated, in my particular vein of Christianity, we treated this life as if it was a dress rehearsal. That it was not the one shot, that it was not the one experience, right? And so, as I watch people live that way, and as I live that way, once I begin to doubt the existence of God, you no longer have the overseer that is now dictating who goes to heaven, who goes to hell. That naturally brings about the next question of, is there any other destinations? All of these things were tied in together for me because of my religious upbringing. Obviously, everyone's different, and there are people who are going to be brought up different, and they have something else. So it makes sense to me that a person could say within their own heart or mind that maybe there is a heaven and maybe it has some type of naturalistic cause. Now, my challenge would be, if that is the case, then let's not live the one life we know we have as if that's true until it is scientifically proven to be so. Then once we discover the natural causes that produce a natural heaven and afterlife, then we can adjust our lives accordingly. But until we know that for sure, then let's work with what we do know for sure we have. And of course, I know a little bit about philosophy, and I know we don't know anything for sure. This could all be a matrix or a brain in a dish somewhere. And, you know, but hell, I've only got so much time, and I only go so far. Yeah, but I appreciate that very much.
Jerry, you said when you were 17 years old, you were listening to Billy Joel, you're going to Jimmy Swagger's church. You get in there, his music catches you, and he convinces you to get on a dead-end street. Have you tried to reach out to Jared, to him, and maybe try to convince him that maybe I might have the correct path, I got a higher road, and you might want to try it? I saw him on TV about 3 or 4 years ago. He's still selling Bibles at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And if he were to, if somebody like that were to come out as an atheist, it'd probably have a bigger impact on Christianity than the Pope resigning.
Right. Well, I would hate to deconvert him because I'd hate for him to stop making music. No, I'm joking. We could use it. We could have him here tonight. He could be playing, more.
Dan still makes music.
Yeah, Dan still makes music. That's right. That's exactly right. No, I haven't reached out to anybody like that. And, to be honest with you, I was a horrible evangelist. That's kind of an evangelistic thing to do, to reach out to that person. I was a horrible Christian evangelist. I always wanted to meet people where they were at and try to work with that, work with that situation. But who knows? Let's see, I'm going to be back in your neck of the woods August the 16th, 17th, and 18th. Y'all got a conference?
Looking forward to it. Yeah, it's
great. So maybe by then, y'all could all, come to the conference, meet me over there. And where are y'all having it at?
Toledo, Ohio.
Toledo, Ohio. Right. Yeah. So when you have that conference in Toledo, Ohio, then maybe by then I will have deconverted Jimmy Swagger.
Well, we might reach out to him also.
There you go. We've had people who's wanted to make the clergy project a little more evangelical, for lack of better words, and reach out to people. But everyone on the board says no, because we don't want to be seen as initiating that process in anyone's life. We want to be there for them if they go through that process naturally, because it's such a high cost. Yes, sir.
I had a couple questions about the clergy project. Sure. First, do you think there are a lot of ministers that are out there that really don't believe? A lot of times you read the Bible, say, okay, I can't believe, and they've studied. Also, how many people are in the clergy project now, and do you have some kind of training program or something to get them, if they're going to leave the ministry, to get them another type of job, another form of support?
Right, that's all very good questions. So to start, all right, the number, we have over 400 people in the clergy project. Yeah, now only a quarter of those are active ministry. All right, so 3/4 are alumni that are in there for various reasons. Either they're receiving some type of support themselves, emotional support. When I say support regarding the clergy project, I'm only talking about emotional support. There's no financial support. Or they're actually giving support to the quarter, the 100 or so that are actually still engaged in the ministry. Okay, and so we've got about 100 in just a little over a year's time that are in pulpits somewhere in America of all types of denominations that are trying to get out, that want to get out. What we're doing for them, and I'd ask you to go out on the internet, go to the Clergy Project website so everybody gets full credit. But Todd Stiefel of the Stiefel Foundation has donated $100,000 to the Clergy Project. This money is going to be used to educate, to re-educate to a degree, but primarily to help these ministers find suitable jobs to get out. I mean, this is what it's going to do. We've actually contracted with a third party that's what they do, is they help people find, for instance, say your factory decides it's going to lay a quarter of its sales people off. This company comes in, works on the resume, discovers what the skill sets are, and then helps them find a new job. And so that's what Todd's money is going to do, is help ministers literally find new jobs, which is pretty stinking incredible.
Yeah.
And which would be, awesome if you had not been in the New York Times.
Women's got a job at American Atheists.
Yes, one at one time did have a job with American Atheists. That's exactly right.
To follow up on that, how do we identify those ministers who are looking to get out? Is there signs? Is there
that are looking to get out,
or just what can you identify, or what can we see in somebody who's maybe in that situation?
I wish there was a really simple answer for that. I think you would have to be in a very intimate conversation with the minister to know that's really the case.
They hide it well.
They hide it well. They have to hide it. They can't slip up. They can't make a mistake. Because so many of the ministers, both male and female within the Clergy Project, their spouses have no idea. I mean, the people they live with 24 hours a day don't know that they're in this situation. For all types of reasons, obviously. And so if their spouses don't know, then chances are you're not going to hear a sermon, because it's very, very tricky, because you and I, we could hear a sermon, whether it's, on the radio or for some reason we're actually in the service, we could hear a sermon and think, he's hitting some key points there. He must be really thinking about things. But what makes religion, as y'all well know, because y'all are doing the recovery from religion, what makes religion last is that it's able to adapt. And just because you see signs of liberality, because you see signs of, of accepting scientific terms or whatever, that can be nothing more than adaptation. That can be nothing more than just trying to catch a wave that's going on within the marketplace of Christianity. It doesn't necessarily mean the person is having a struggle. But it's worth a try regardless. I say send them, something with the website on it. Send them something about the Clergy Project. And one other quick thing that I think you asked me to speculate how many ministers are out there. Yeah. My contention is, and this is generalized, and I can't, show 25 sources, my feeling is, after being in the ministry for 25 years and knowing so many ministers, I think every minister who has true humanistic values is agnostic and doesn't know it. I really do. I think they're agnostic and they don't know it. And they may not know it because they're not really allowing themselves to entertain those particular thoughts. They may not know it because they don't even know agnosticism exists. There's a lot of reasons they may not know it. But you can't, in the ministry, if you care about the people you're ministering to, you have to acknowledge the failure of religion. You have to acknowledge it. You have to acknowledge it to such a point that you have to prepare for it, you have to preach about it, and you have to craft a doctrine that can handle it. the failure of religion. You have to create a doctrine. I mean, that's how I made my way to deism. Is you eventually, you have to have a God that it's okay if he doesn't show up. And you have to preach messages that support the fact that he may or may not show up. But that's not new. You go all the way back to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In that particular story, they tell the king, our God's able. He may not do it, but he is able to deliver us from the fiery furnace. I mean, this is just how religion has to be handled. So I think there's a lot of agnosticism. Yes.
Back when you were a minister, was there a particular? I assume that you probably read the entire Bible.
Sure, okay. Many times. I don't remember much of it, but I remember.
Was there any particular story that comes to mind that, like, if somebody within your ministry asked you to explain something that you felt you had to do the most acrobats around to try to justify?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Oh, yeah. The first one that comes to mind is that damn sheep-bear eating all those kids. Because the prophet, couldn't handle being criticized. I hated that. I did. I really, really hated it. Now when I was young, what makes me work, in not just in this movement but in life is I'm real quick to tell myself. Okay. And when I was much younger in the ministry, I kind of got off on the idea that a minister could be so important to God, that you can't even criticize him. I did. I thought, I truly at one time thought that my critics were in danger by criticizing me. I truly did. We would say all the time, touch not God's anointed.
Oh, wow.
We'd say that all the time, touch not God's anointed. If you lay your hand on a preacher, right? You lay your hand on that preacher, you've got some trouble, And I was egotistical enough and loved myself enough, thought I was awesome enough. Of course, age and family has a way of working that out of you. But, I really thought I deserved that position in life. I really did. I really thought I deserved for God to, blow your car motor up if you criticize. I probably wouldn't have asked him to eat you alive. And honestly, the whole concept of the flood, that's probably one of the first places that I started really dealing with metaphor, was with the flood, because it just seemed such, for lack of better words, overkill. And so, I was fortunate that by the time my mind started being open to those particular stories and really hearing what they had to say, I was flirting with some denominations that were a little more into, we called it greasy grace, and so, so you could kind of squeeze around a little bit and say, well, the church is the ark. And that really, and what really happened was that it was sin, all that stuff. Yes, sir.
Will there be an audio book?
Yes. There'll be an audio book, an ebook. It'll all be there. It's a major publisher. I'm blessed. and we're over here. Yes, in behind you.
Kurt, you mentioned the website earlier, a lot of activity on Wednesdays and Sundays.
Was back when I was doing it. Yeah.
Okay, is that connected to the clergy project, is that right?
Yes, that's what I mean. Inside the forums. Yeah.
There's no what kind of questions, concerns, thoughts were on there, and how they were discussed.
Yeah, what kind of, there's not really, the questions at this point. See, we vet the members to the extent that they are already self-proclaimed to themselves, self-proclaimed atheist, agnostic. There's no one is coming into the clergy project that's still trying to figure things out about doctrine or anything like that. You can't get in without proving to the screener that you don't believe. And we do that for numerous reasons. One reason is we truly are not interested in being part of their process. We want to support them because they've gone through the process. We understand the price that's paid for going through this process, and we want to be there. We don't want to be, the initiator. of the process or even complete the process for them. So there's absolutely no doctrinal questions. There's no, what about this? What about that? It's more like, who's been through a divorce? Anybody know a good attorney? What will happen to my kids? Did anybody? Things like I remember one of the very first questions that I got onto the form and fell into the thread of discussion over was, my daughter keeps asking me about such and such in the Bible. Does anybody have a clever way of answering this? Does anybody have a way to deal with this? Because I don't want to lie to my daughter, but if I tell her what I really think, she's going to run straight to her mother, and there we go. We're off to the races. And so it's really more about life issues. And then they do also, and I haven't been participating in the forum for some time because I've been on the board for some time now. That doesn't preclude me from it. I've been a little busy as well. They do just take advantage of this safe place to talk about things they can't talk about anywhere else. They'll be like, oh, I was reading this, philosophy book about such and such and found that interesting. What do y'all think about that? It's not asking a question about theology and trying to get it answered. It's really just being able to have a conversation that they can't have with anyone else in the world. It's like coming to this meeting, but anonymously. Yes, sir.
I have read in the Tibetan Buddhism that if one wants to get into the order, of doing research in meditation or seeking the truth, one has to do the qualification round even to get to that level. Basically, the qualification round requires a person to go underground for 3 days without food and water. Okay, and the door is not locked underground. If he wants to get out and run away, so he's disqualified automatically. If a guy can sustain that kind of thirst or passion, he is then allowed to take admission in the monasteries and do further research. And
sure.
So, do you do some kind of qualification test before entering Christianity to be
before entering the what?
This priesthood.
Oh, for me personally?
Yes.
Well, I didn't have to get in a hole in the ground for 3 days. But I would have done it. I certainly would have done it. Unfortunately, I did not. I did not have to do that. My home church was a little country church, made up of really country folks, and everything was about being led. We wouldn't even say Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit was too liberal. Everybody, all the Baptists say Holy Spirit. That's because they weren't really trying. We were King James. We'd say Holy Ghost. And everything was about living a life, a sinless life, to the best of your ability, living a sinless life and a life of devotion that would allow the Holy Ghost to use you. And the Holy Ghost, if she, whatever, used you, then that was the credentials. Okay, so for instance, once again, it's in the book. Hope after faith. No. When I felt called to preach, and I truly felt called, I felt like this was my life's mission. I dreamed about it. Sermons, every time that I'd read the Bible, I would see it in sermon form. I wouldn't read it and just be a story. Every time I'd read it, I'd be like, that'll preach. That's old school stuff, But I went to my pastor and told him, I said, I feel like I'm called to preach. And so there was literally no initiation to go through for that other than getting up and proving you could do it. And, unfortunately, I could do it. The very first try at 17, I got up and I preached for probably about 15, 20 minutes, and it worked. The rest is history. Now, that's not true for everybody, obviously. There's a lot of theological schools. There's a lot of credentials that most ministers have to acquire, but seldom are they that type of requirement.
I have a follow-up question. What I feel is that one can easily convince other person, even if he wants to lie, and he wants to get into that kind of growth of being a priest. So it's kind of a very shallow level test, which anybody can fake if he wants to. Okay. So if the entrance is very shallow, even the exit is going to be very easy, because the moment you change the mind easily, every day we change our mind about eating our food.
Right.
It's so easy.
Yeah, I think you'd have to. I think that is an Eastern philosophical point of view. You know, I think it's an axiom that exists, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true or that it's that clean and simple. Because once again, if you get the book, you'll see that getting out is not only difficult. It was not nearly as easy as just getting up preaching, okay, the first try. It's actually almost impossible because of responsibilities, culture, everything that's wrapped around you. And I understand where you're going about there being a level of understanding and appreciation once you submitted yourself to that master. Now you're on a course of actually learning something you wouldn't have been able to learn otherwise. Once you learned that, it's almost impossible to unlearn it. I appreciate where you're coming from, but I think there are other ways that you experience that. That's not necessarily Eastern.
My son is a minister, pastor of 2 churches in Kansas. I don't know where I went wrong now. and I've wondered, what can I do about this? And I've concluded not a damn thing.
Yeah, that'd be my conclusion as well. Yeah, and the reason I say that is I think the people like me who get out, for lack of better words, I think we're the lucky ones. And I think where we were lucky was that life took very specific twists and turns that created these conflicts. Because not everybody runs into these conflicts. There are very serious people that will never entertain the thoughts that you and I think are important.
In his case, though, the rebellion was not attacked, it was the other way around.
Was the other way, yeah. Yeah, that's the, is it time?
Yeah, I got one more question.
Oh, and we have one more gentleman here that I don't, can we grab him real quick?
Take him first.
I was curious whether ministers in training are exposed to philosophical and scientific ideas which undercut their beliefs, or whether they're shielded from them.
I think it depends on where the training is. There's an industry that has developed, obviously for some time, that if you're going to be Southern Baptist, there are Southern Baptist colleges. If you're going to be United Pentecostal, there are United Pentecostal colleges. And you're less likely to learn things that would undercut in those particular settings. And if they are presented, they're probably presented in a way that, probably, doesn't really cause you to think or to question. Now, there are exceptions to that, and some of those exceptions are members in the Clergy Project now, because they had a professor who, I don't know if he was tenured or he just, didn't care, and he would say a few things that planted seeds that later grew into the misery that they're in now, But by and large, I think most ministers are being taught what they're supposed to say.
So they're shielded from these ideas?
I think in most cases they are. And it just depends. Obviously that's more of fundamentalism, versus liberal Christianity. Liberal Christianity, it may not be nearly as protective. It probably isn't nearly as protective, just by its very nature. Yes, sir.
With people starting to come out of the closet and the people brave like yourself doing this, where do you see everything in 5 years or 20 years down the road? Do you think it'll be the same as now, or a huge difference because of people coming out and making a difference?
I wish that I knew for sure, and I guess nobody ever could. I can't be a believer about it because I don't know. But like my wife, I can be a wisher. And my hope is that people like myself coming out will have a major impact, on our culture in general. But I don't think it's necessarily, obviously people like me coming out can affect a certain portion of the demographic. It goes without saying. But at the same time, religion is able to write us off very quickly. Religion is able to say, well, he never did believe. I remember he preached some loosey-goosey thing back way when, so he never, they're able to disqualify you very, very quickly. So I don't think our future is as much, I don't think the hope of our future is much contingent upon the people who are coming out as it is on the people who never go in. I think that's the hope of our future.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Jerry.
That's up to you. Do you want to let
Well, no, you can handle it. You do your
Okay.
3 minutes.
Okay.
We got a few things we're gonna do. Jerry's gonna come back on for one more special thing that he thinks he can do under 3 minutes. I don't think we'll do it.
I'll do it under 30 seconds.
So that he's gonna do. I had a chance to see him do this. It was a blast. But we want to leave a little bit of time because for those that want to get involved in Adopt a Highway, I'm going to kind of section off this room a little bit. I want this to be a little interactive. I'm going to be up here. We can talk about the Adopt a Highway. I would also like to use that corner of the room for people that would like to talk about the church-state separation issues, of maybe organizing a little bit and getting people to actually be responsible and go to the county city meetings. On the other side back here, we'd also like people that want to start talking about what charity events they want to go to. You know, if you have a pen, we'll write down your ideas, and then when you kind of come see me afterwards, we can discuss them. If we have time, we'll discuss them up here. If not, we'll do them at the next meeting for that. Also, in between that, if you have a few guest speakers that you know that we can reach out to that would like to come speak to our group. And I didn't think about this enough, and Jerry did it on his own, but there's Freethought Dayton, there's Lexington, Louisville. We might even be able to make it worth their while to do a little bit of a tour around here, which Jerry was smart enough to do that I didn't think of. So those are things that maybe we could do to hit them up. So I'm going to invite Jerry back on the stage one more time. He's going to go back to his preacher days. You saw a little hint of it when he first started speaking, but we're going to let him preach to you for just a few minutes.
Do you have any actual?
This is it. On the spot. Thought it was just on the spot, but here we go.
And what is the money going to? So
our guest speaker fund.
Oh, is it really?
Because we paid you so much to be here. Now we're going to start raising money for it. Jerry did this for absolutely nothing and came out here as not and as you saw, he just got his bankruptcy done, so we appreciate his sacrifice on this. So,
yeah. So you might want to shut the door in case we get loud.
Yeah, let's get loud. You want me to shut that?
Yeah, I think it'll be good.
Do you mind if we shut the door? He's going to get a little loud and obnoxious.
I'm now getting asked to do this ever so often, and I honestly don't feel like I'm that good at it. But it's a worthy cause, and it stresses me out because you have to make something literally up out of nothing, at that moment. So we will fly by the seat of our pants. But I'm going to preach for a second. If that's going to bother you or trigger any kind of emotional, I'm serious. You'd be surprised how many times I've been cussed out after doing this. So anyway, I don't know. I just don't know, brothers and sisters. It's been a long time that I've been on this journey. I want you to know that I've traveled near and far across this land. I've seen the ups and I've seen the downs. I've experienced the beauty that all this world has to offer, but I want to tell you not a bit of it's come for free. Can I get a Darwin?
Darwin.
As I've traveled across this country and as I've traveled across this mental landscape, I've understood that there's been a price that's had to be paid. There's been a price that's had to be paid, brothers and sisters. Not just by me, but by so many other people. They did not get here for free. Can I get a Darwin? Somebody's got to pay a price. Somebody's got to step forward. Somebody's got to move and make something happen. This doesn't happen on its own. I would love to tell you that angels are going to come down from heaven and they're going to make all of this be right. But you are the responsibility. You are the person that possesses the pocketbook. You are the person that is able to give when nobody else is able to give. This may be done for free, but it's not cheap. Can I get a Darwin? So I would ask you to open up your hearts. I would ask you with all sincerity to look back over your life and think about all the people that paid the price to bring you to where you're at today. All of your yesterdays, they had a price tag. All of your positive experiences, they cost somebody something that may have been negative or may have been positive. But nobody got here for free. It's going to be a day is coming, brothers and sisters, that great speakers are going to stand just right here behind this very platform. maybe, even, possibly, if Darwin is willing, there may be a speaker greater than I don't know. But I want you to know, regardless of who stands here, we understand by a book that isn't quite as good as we were told, we know that the laborer is worthy of his hire. So if you want to see a better future, if you're anxious to see a change, if you desire to live in a world where all the good things are paid for, then I would say it's time to break out your pocketbook and to not just give a Darwin, but to give a dime or two. Can I get a Darwin?
A dime.
Don't make me holler, don't make me shout. Perfect fucking thing, Bob.
We got a little collection paper to pass around the tables, if you don't mind. That'll go to our speaker fund to raise our speaker. So.
Like
Excellent. There's a pat on the back that you deserve so much. He did that after like 20, 30 minutes. I was just, the whole place was almost 1,000 people there. I just was like, you got to do it. I think I'll thank you.
It's Billy Graham all over it.
There is.
Triple box, please.
Oh, really?
Okay.
And I believe that before, there is a former preaching room. You don't have to call yourself out, but if you want to make your way to Jerry and talk to him, he would probably love to talk to you.
Absolutely.
So I know that was on part of the registration there, that there is a fortune, you know, so if you want to talk to Jerry later, please do so. If you would like to be on the Adopt the Highway, we're going to kind of go over here. You might have to move tables a little bit for people, but it wouldn't hurt to interact and get to know people. We're going to talk about the Adopt the Highway. Over here, we're going to talk about the church-state separation, and then there on that side, get together if you're more interested in the community service projects. And so even with some of the other partners, you know, Free Thought, Dewitt, when you come from Great Lakes, we can partner on some of these things. I think that we can do together. We're much stronger together than we are separate. So
it's a group in Columbus.
You guys get us this, or?
And then Quinn, if you could on the discussions, or you got my number, figure out what you did, we'd like to pass that along. And let me see if I can put this up here.